Hello aspirants, taking a look at editorials for 28 October 2016. The first editorial in the Hindu newspaper today is The Comeback Man. So this is regarding the former Chief Minister of Karnataka from BJP, B.S. Yediyurappa, who was forced to resign in 2011 because of charges of corruption leveled against him by the Karnataka Lokayukta. So presently a special court of CBI has cleared B.S. Yediyurappa of all charges. So this paves his way for a political comeback. So that's the idea. 2018 assembly elections in Karnataka will see B.S. Yediyurappa as the chief ministerial candidate of BJP. That is expected. So let's see what happens. The idea was these charges against him were framed by Lokayukta, and these charges were on illegal mining activities which were taking place in Bellary district in Karnataka. So this Bellary district has mining leases been given to Reddy Brothers company, and these in acquiring these leases, the Reddy Brothers have been alleged to have greased the palms of many politicians and many administrative officers. The special court presently cleared the trusts held by this sons of B.S. Yediyurappa from charges of corruption. So those are clean transactions. That's what it says. Reddy Brothers transactions into these trusts. Plus also the ban on export of iron ore which he had imposed. That also is cleared of any corruption charges, because it is said that was the entire government's decision, not the chief minister's decision alone. So this ban on export of iron ore also came after there were charges of illegal export of iron ore from India too. So those charges are also there. And plus the royalties being paid to the government for these mining leases were underpaid. So that's how illegal mining activities took place. It resulted in a huge loss to the government exchequer of Karnataka, and plus the corruption money which circulated up here. So even it is said that transactions took place with around 4,000 bank accounts involved. So this is the extent of corrupt activity here. But the person B.S. Yediyurappa has been cleared of charges. Now what is Lokayukta 2? You must have heard of Lokpal and Lokayukta. Lokpal was what was demanded by Anna Hazare too during his mass protests. So Lokpal, Lokayuktas are bodies which have been recommended to be set up in India by the first ARC2. That was the first Administrative Reforms Commission of 1966. Second ARC of 2005, which was chaired by Veerappa Moily, also recommended Lokpal and Lokayukta. So many states have initiated and set up Lokayuktas through their state acts. The Lokpal was the central level demand. So what are these Lokpal and Lokayuktas? Lokpal and Lokayuktas are bodies at central and state government respectively to investigate into charges of corruption, illegal activities by administrative officers, and in some cases by politicians also. So that also decides about how you frame the act. So politicians may not be involved. This all is based on the ombudsman system. Ombudsman is the system which is in India known as Lokpal Lokayukta. This system is originated in Scandinavian countries. Scandinavian countries are in north of Europe, majorly Norway, Sweden, Finland and Denmark. So these are called Scandinavian countries where this ombudsman system is centuries old now. So India is also recommended to adopt this, and states have adopted it. So under this, then these are chaired by former judges also. So even Karnataka Lokayukta, which indicted Yediyurappa, was chaired by former judge Santosh Hegde. So these were the charges framed here under this act. This is about the illegal mining activities too, you can see. So mineral rich areas we generally see there are illegal activities going on, plus the development in these regions is also low. So with respect to this, you must also remember we discussed in the start of October, I think 2nd October, about the Mines and Minerals Development and Regulation Act, which was an act passed in September 2015. So even presently there was news about coal levy. So there has been a levy imposed on these mining leases. Means if you are given a mining lease by the government, you have to pay a royalty to the government. And now from 2015, you have to pay a DMF levy, District Mineral Foundation levy, which is 30% of the royalty. Means in addition to royalty, a levy. So this levy will go into a separate fund which will be used to implement the Yojana launched in September 2015 again, that is Pradhan Mantri Khanij Kshetra Kalyan Yojana. So these we have already discussed earlier too. So these are the new reforms which have also taken place to bring in development in these mineral rich regions which are lacking development, plus also regularizing minings. So that is there. Plus then these are the illegal aspects which were in case of Bellary mines, that is collusion of officials and politicians in permitting illegal mining, underpayment of royalties to the state, and environmental damage. So there needs to be two assessments done. One is social impact assessment, SIA, and another one is environmental impact assessment, EIA. So there were illegalities even in this. So any project being launched has to see what will be the social impact of this project. How will it benefit the region? And second is environment impact assessment. How will it affect the environment? Whether it would benefit or hamper or harm the environment. So that assessments need to be done. Those reports being evaluated. Then a permission needs to be given. So that's there. So this is about the Lokayukta report also, which indicted PS Yediyurappa. Right. Next we go to the second news, which is the editorial Maduro faces rough weather. So this is regarding Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, who is facing, probably would face a recall. Recall is basically a direct democracy tool, means directly voters can vote him out. So once he is the president, he can be voted out from that post. So a recall will take place only if prior conditions are satisfied, and those prior conditions are as follows. It's a three-stage process. This is Venezuela in South America. So the first stage is that the opposition has to collect 1% voters' signatures. So of all the voters in each state of Venezuela, there are 24 states in Venezuela. So in each state, at least 1% of the voters should approve that they want to go for a recall. Then second stage would be, once this is done, 3-day period would be given in which 20% voters' signatures has to be collected from each state, again to have the recall implemented. Then in the third stage, after these two stages are passed successfully, in the third stage actual recall referendum would take place, means voting in all the states, entire electorate, in which the votes brought in for recall should be more than the votes with which the president was elected to the post. So if that happens, then the president stands recalled. So president has to vacate his post. Now this also, there is a condition that what happens after this. So there are two scenarios. If this recall takes place before the midterm of the president, then a fresh presidential election would take place. And if the recall takes place after the midterm of the president, then the president resigns and the vice president takes over. So that is there in Venezuela. Presently what has happened is the first stage was passed, but now the judiciary in Venezuela has found inconsistencies here and it has stalled this first stage. So though the second stage has started, but now they are asking, the first stage has inconsistencies, irregularities, so the first stage has to take place again. After that, the recall stage would come. So it will take some time yet, and the midterm of the president in Venezuela presently will be 10th Jan 2017. So we have to wait and watch when this recall process will be completed, before or after, and what happens next. So that is about the recall. The second aspect is why a recall has been initiated against him. So the reason all lies in Venezuelans' economic status right now. Venezuela is in a huge economic crisis. This economic crisis is again fueled because of the oil price crisis. We have already discussed this earlier about Saudi Arabia facing the crisis because of oil prices reducing. Venezuela is also an oil producing economy. It is a part of OPEC also, Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, which is led by Saudi Arabia. Major country is that. So the Venezuelan economy was based on oil. The former president Hugo Chavez, who was a populist president, initiated many social welfare measures which have worked in favor of Venezuela too, in health, education, social welfare. But then the funding of these schemes was through oil economy. Since the oil prices fell, continuing with these social welfare schemes is a huge burden on the government, and reducing these subsidies and welfare programs is unpopulist. So this is the dilemma which the government faces right now, and there is a huge inflation in Venezuela. It's called to gone into hyperinflationary cycle. The reason being that to sustain the economy as it was going on, Venezuelan government took a huge amount of debt. To repay the debt, it has started printing currency. So when you print currency, your currency in the market increases, it goes into the market, and that results in inflation. So if you look at the inflation levels in Venezuela too, in 2 years time, this is the inflation level and unemployment level. It has crossed 100%. And this is the value of the currency of Venezuela. In 2014, for $1, you would get 64.1 bolivars, which is the Venezuelan currency. And in 2016 now, for $1, it is equivalent to 959.4 bolivars. So this is 93% drop in the value of the currency. So this is the problem which Venezuelan economy is presently facing. And the editorial also says that this all has happened because of corruption in state enterprises. There is heavy dependence on imported consumer goods due to meager incentive for production in a highly subsidized economy. There is artificial price and exchange controls that has resulted in black money for foreign currency, and that's why inflation persists. So the reforms that are required are that the currency should be stabilized, subsidies need to be reduced, and artificial price controls have to be removed. So some difficult decisions need to be taken by the Venezuelan government, either by the present president or later after he is removed. So, but Venezuelan economy is in a crisis which needs an urgent action. So that is about the two editorials. Next we look at the question bank. The first question which we have picked up for today is on the lead article. This is the issue of validity of triple talaq, nikah halala and polygamy needs to be considered in the light of principles of gender justice and overriding principles of non-discrimination, dignity and equality. Comment. This is actually the statement given in the affidavit by the BJP government to the Supreme Court on the issue of triple talaq. So all these three things are interlinked, and presently the article is talking majorly on polygamy issues. On triple talaq and nikah halala we have already discussed it earlier. One point which this article brings forth is that triple talaq has been banned. Triple talaq is talaq-e-bidat, means triple talaq actually should mean there should be 3 months of conciliation as mandated in the Quran for in between two talaqs. So there should be a gap and conciliation process essential. So those judgments already we have seen earlier Supreme Court has implemented. So judgments are already there disallowing talaq-e-bidat. So that aspect is already resolved according to this article. So what needs to be taken, how it needs to be taken further is even nikah halala he says is linked to talaq-e-bidat, because when talaq takes place in a go, if triple talaq means saying talaq thrice immediately is allowed, then the person will enter into this phase of having done something in a haste, and then they go for nikah halala, which is another nikah being done. The woman undergoes to just be allowed to enter into the first marriage again. So if triple talaq means talaq-e-bidat is illegal, then there will be no reason for undergoing nikah halala. So those two aspects can be resolved. There are no problems. The third aspect which he discusses is polygamy. So the polygamy which is allowed in Quran also he details out, saying that polygamy is not mandated or not an essential practice as we have already discussed, but rather in the Quran two men and women are considered a pair. So there is one woman for every man. So that is clearly mentioned quite often in the Quran. One exception where it is mentioned that person can marry another woman too is in conditions of women widowed and orphaned. So in such situations which were prevalent when Islam was being spread in the initial stages, when there were many men who died in wars and women became widowed and there were orphan children. So to take care of them, to take over that responsibility, this aspect was allowed, that men could marry another woman too, and this was allowed provided that they could take care of that woman too and give equal status to both families. So if that is not possible, it is clearly stated in the Quran, then don't marry again. So that is one aspect on the basis of which polygamy, or rather he says this is called polygyny. Polygyny means man marrying multiple women, and polyandry means woman marrying multiple men. So polygamy includes both. Polyandry is not allowed in Islam, and that is not what is discussed here too. Polygyny is what is in question. So in this aspect too he says it is conditional. So making polygyny also conditional is the way ahead. So that is suggested by him, and that too as mandated by the Quran. So there can be no Nobody opposing, even the Muslims cannot oppose it, saying that it is against the laws of Islam. So that is how even Islamic states have gone ahead. They have banned talaq-e-bidat. So India is also planning to do the same thing. So nikah halala becomes not a question, a non-issue. And the third aspect, polygyny, can also be made conditional. So then it becomes in line with the present requirements too, plus as per the Quranic laws also. So that is the way ahead which is being suggested here. He talks about one more thing, which is Hindu bigamy. So in Hindus also, there are cases of men marrying multiple women. A second woman is also there in many men's life. So these second woman may be through wedlock or not, and even if he marries, it's actually not recognized. So when this second marriage is not recognized, but he has a second wife and children with him, there have been cases where the judiciary has given them equal status, given them right to compensation. So when such things already happen, that men marry another woman or men live with another woman, then why to ban it? Why not take in the social realities presently and go ahead? So he says that when people are given the right to choose the way they live, choose the way of their sexual orientations, then why restrictions on this aspect? Then the next editorial is regarding the goods and services tax. The question is, what tax rates for the goods and services under the new GST laws will maximize revenues and minimize inflation? Discuss. So this is the question which GST Council is looking into, that what should be the ideal tax rate. We have already discussed this quite often, and we'll keep discussing in future also, because November again there is a GST Council meet scheduled. So the GST rates which the center has recommended are tax slabs. We have discussed this yesterday also when Arun Jaitley's blog was discussed in news. So these tax slabs are not acceptable to the state governments. So the idea is there's something called Laffer curve. What is this Laffer curve? Is how much is the tax rate, percentage of tax rate, and how much is the tax revenue collection. Means if the tax rates are very low, then government's collection of revenue will also be very low. But if the tax rates are very high, then also the government's tax revenue collection will be low. The reason being that tax rates being exorbitantly high result in evasion of taxes. So people indulge in corrupt practices and taxes collected are not optimum. So there is an optimum level of tax rate at which, this is the point here, at which the tax collection would be the highest. So the article also says that though Laffer gave this idea, he's an American economist who gave this idea, he did not say what is this ideal tax rate. So this is still a dilemma which GST Council is presently looking into. And another thing is that the tax revenue collection would be simplified through this GST reform. So there will be less of tax evasion too, that we have already discussed. So anyway, the current tax rates, it says, is there are more than 25 different tax rates on various goods and services in all 29 states and union territories, and both center and state levy taxes. So under GST Council, once GST is brought in, there will be single collection or single duty, and that would be at what rate is the question. So like yesterday he said that chappals and ACs cannot be taxed at the same rate. So now this article is talking about how states would be affected, because under GST the states would lose their fiscal autonomy. It would be the rates decided and charges levied by this GST decided once and for all. The government is planning to pass it through the legislature to make it permanent and then go ahead. So that's why they have added an additional cess, because of the 5-year compensation which the center has to provide to the states if they incur any losses because of implementation of GST. So a cess been implemented which is temporary, which can be later removed. So that is how they plan to bring in funds for compensation. But how an environment cess can be used for funding states, means cess imposed on a particular condition or particular requirement and then used for some other purpose. So I don't know whether that is also legal or not, but anyway that's how they are planning to go ahead. Maybe they should not name it environment cess, but then that cess is also there only on luxury goods, which are the goods will be charged at the highest rate, which the government says will be around 26%. So the states are losing their autonomy. That's why they want tax rates itself to be high rather than cess additionally being imposed to ensure that they undergo minimum losses. So that is their main fear. So they want optimum tax rate, so it will be a very high. High means it will be a median rate. So if such a median rate is imposed, the the central government is saying that will result in heavy taxation on commodities, and that will result in inflation also taking place because of high prices. So this aspect is also brought forth, but states are still resistant. Of course, they need to come together and come to a solution, which we'll see how it goes ahead. The article actually says that the states should take over the responsibility for compensation, not impose a cess. They should indulge in additional borrowings and pay for the compensation. But of course, the state does not want to have such conditions put on them. They don't want to take that burden, and they want to shift it through cess. So that is about the case. Another question which the GST Council will look into is who will collect the taxes. GST tax would be collected at one point, and that can be either the center or the state. This article is pro-state, so it says that it should be collected by the states, because that is the point of where the government and the people come into contact. So GST is a destination tax, it collected at the destination, so it should best be left to the states, is what is argued. So that is about the GST. We have already discussed all this in previous articles too. So these are the proposed slabs of GST by the center which states do not agree to. The last article, last question which we are discussing is, the existing system of performance evaluation for lower judiciary is plagued with various problems, while the higher judiciary in India is not subjected to any sort of evaluation. Discuss in light of assessment of judges in US and EU. So presently the news was that the law department in Gujarat, on the recommendation of the Gujarat High Government, initiated its whip on 17 judges from lower courts. And these judges were ordered to retire, and the reason was given unsatisfactory performance. So such cases have come forth earlier too. There has been a case where judiciary has also questioned that what are the material basis on which this unsatisfactory performance or is of integrity is doubtful is put forth. So there should be clear way in which assessment is done, which is not the case in India. Assessment is done based on ACRs, annual confidential reports. So that assessment is done by higher judiciary, senior most judges review it. So this process is said is not also regular. Evaluation is not done transparently. So there is a need for reforms here. That is not doubted. But even ACRs in civilian cases, in cases of civil servants, has been replaced by performance evaluation reports rather than annual confidential reports. But for judges that still continues, and this is there only for lower judges. For higher judges there is no procedure for assessment. In case of USA, it's a little different. The reason being that in USA, judges are not appointed. In India, lower judges are selected through a competitive exam. But in USA, judges are elected. So there the public is required to know about how the judges are functioning. So for that, a retention election also takes place, where the judge's performance record is put forth in public domain, and then a retention election takes place whether the judge should be retained or not. So this entire process is regularized, and it is called Judicial Performance Evaluation, JPE in USA. So it can be used by India also, because the basis on which this evaluation is done, it is both qualitative and quantitative. So the quantitative, like rate of disposal of cases by the judge. So otherwise there will be judicial backlogs, the quality of judgments, legal reason used, the knowledge of law of the judge, behavior towards lawyers in court proceedings, independence and transparency. So all these aspects, parameters are based on which the JPE, Judicial Performance Evaluation, is conducted in USA, which can be incorporated by India also. But one aspect that we don't have elections here, so that aspect is different. Then the next, in EU, the way it is done is there is a European Commission for Efficiency of Justice. So it gives EU Justice Scoreboard, which is published annually, which again rates the judges working of the judicial system on similar parameters: efficiency of courts in justice disposal, the costs per case, the budget of the courts. So all this is seen, and EU Justice Scoreboard is prepared. But in India, that is not there. Only confidential reports without material evidence being in place is put forth, based on which judges are asked to retire or reprimanded. So lessons for India are, of course, that we need to evolve some scientific process based on which judges can be elected. These performance evaluations parameters can be used in India also. and it will encourage indiscriminate disposal of cases. That should be there, because in Madras High Court such an initiative has already been taken where qualitative and quantitative performance assessment of judges is done. So this happened this year too, but then the advocates say that this results in undue pressure on the judge to dispose the case. So such a haste is also not good for the case. So this aspect is to be evaluated, that how to improve the quality of justice also, and pendency rates also go down. So India will have to start a discussion on this. He says all stakeholders like judges, lawyers, academics, members of civil society be brought together and bring in a format for judicial evaluation which has minimum bias and maximum transparency. So that is it for today. Thank you.